I never imagined that the worst decision of my life would be irreversible the very day it was made. Some choices seem small at the time, almost justifiable, but they carry consequences that time insists on collecting with interest. For years, I convinced myself that I was right. Only later, when it was too late, did I understand the magnitude of the mistake I made within my own home. My name is Michael. I'm 42 years old. I own a house in a suburban town in the United States. I have a wife, two teenage children, and a routine that, on the outside, seemed stable. Inside, however, something was slowly rotting. My mother, Rose, a widow, had been living with me for 3 years. What began as a temporary arrangement turned into a burden that I came to see as a daily nuisance. The discussions began in a banal way. Too many opinions, heavy silences, harsh words, until, without realizing it, I stopped speaking as a son and started acting as a judge. Every gesture of hers irritated me. Every piece of advice sounded like an invasion. And when my patience ran out, I did something I never thought I was capable of doing to the woman who brought me into the world. Today, in telling this story, I don't seek pity or absolution. I seek truth. Because sometimes punishment doesn't come as immediate retribution, but as a slow, painful lesson, and impossible to forget. I thought I was in control of my life. I worked too much, came home exhausted, and all I wanted when I got home was silence. But silence became a rare commodity since my mother moved in with us. At first, I told everyone it was temporary, just until she got her life in order. Deep down, I knew I was lying. It was easier to pretend that the situation had a deadline than to admit that I didn't want to share my space with her anymore. My mother would wake up early, make coffee, and organize the kitchen in her own way. I saw that as interference, not care. Any comment would become a source of friction. If she said something about the boys, I would explode. If she gave her opinion about my marriage, I felt attacked. Gradually, I stopped hearing her motherly tone and began to see only an old woman occupying a place that, in my mind, was no longer hers. My wife was also at her breaking point. She avoided direct confrontation, but her looks said it all. The children started locking themselves in their room when the arguments escalated. The house seemed smaller, more stuffy, as if the walls absorbed the anger we spread daily. And yet, I insisted on convincing myself that the problem wasn't mine. The decisive argument happened over something ridiculous: a different spice in the dinner, a snide remark. My mother said I wasn't in charge of her. That hit me like a challenge. I felt my pride wounded, my authority threatened. Instead of breathing, I chose to hurt. I opened the door, grabbed her suitcase, and said words that still echo in my head. When she left, her steps slow and her eyes filled with tears, I felt an immediate sense of relief. The house fell silent. I thought I had won. I had no idea that this silence was only the beginning of the price I would still have to pay. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling of victory. The house was quiet, organized just the way I liked it, without any comments, without slow footsteps in the kitchen. I had a quick coffee and went to work as if nothing had happened. At no point did I think about calling my mother. On the contrary, a part of me believed she needed that lesson. I repeated this like a mantra to avoid facing the weight of guilt. It was my wife who told me, at the end of the day, that my mother had spent the night in a municipal shelter. She spoke softly, as if afraid of my reaction. I just shrugged. I said it was temporary, that she would soon return apologizing. Deep down, I wanted to believe that I still had control of the situation, that the door I had closed could be opened whenever I wanted. Weeks passed. No calls, no messages. Pride turned to discomfort, but I wouldn't admit it. The routine continued. the days piling up on top of each other. I worked longer hours, arrived home later, avoided thinking. At night sometimes I would wake up with the impression of hearing footsteps in the hallway. It was just the empty house reminding me of what I had done. 6 months later, everything happened too fast. Stuck in traffic on an American highway, I felt a strange tingling in my left arm. The steering wheel felt heavy, the air disappeared. I tried to call for help, but my vision went dark. The next thing I remember is of white lights and distant voices. I woke up days later in a hospital, unable to move my body or speak. A severe stroke. My wife was crying. My children looked at me, terrified. And on that first conscious night, I saw something I never expected to see. My mother, sleeping on the cold floor next to my bed, as if she had never been expelled from my life. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My still confused mind tried to understand how that scene was possible. My mother, wrapped in a worn blanket, slept on the floor of the hospital room, just inches from my bed. Her face was tired, her hair completely white, her hands crossed over her chest. The same woman I had thrown out of the house was now there, watching my breathing. I couldn't speak, nor move my arms or legs. All I had left were my eyes. I watched as she woke up, slowly stood up, and came to me. She wiped my face with a damp cloth, straightened the sheet, just like she did when I was a child. She didn't say anything. She didn't demand anything of me. She acted as if that had been her place from the beginning. My wife entered the room shortly after, surprised to see her there. She asked, almost in a whisper, why she had come. My mother answered with a simplicity that pierced me like a blade. She said she was taking care of her son. That shelter was for those who had no one, and she still had me, even after everything. The following days repeated themselves in the same way. She would arrive before dawn and only leave when the nurses insisted. She fed me spoonful by spoonful, cleaned my body without showing disgust or tiredness, and turned me over in bed to avoid sores. At night, she refused the offered chair and returned to the floor. I watched everything in silence, trapped inside my own body. Each of her gestures dismantled the certainties I had built up over the years, and for the first time I understood that her strength had never been in her body, but in her capacity to love even after being hurt. The doctor called my wife into the hallway one quiet morning. I saw her return, her eyes swollen, trying to hide her tears. She approached the bed and held my hand, motionless. She said my mother had again refused overnight accommodation. She preferred to sleep there, on the hospital floor, even though she was exhausted. She said she didn't trust leaving my room empty during the night. My wife tried to convince her. She said she needed to rest, that it wasn't her obligation to be there after everything I had done. My mother just shook her head with a tired smile. She said she didn't raise a child to abandon him when he needed her most, even though she had been abandoned first. That phrase kept echoing inside me, louder than any monitor beeping around me. That night, something changed. A tear rolled down my paralyzed eye. My mother noticed immediately. She came closer, ran her hand across my forehead, and told me I could cry. She said she had already cried enough for the two of us. For the first time since the stroke, I felt like I was still alive inside. The recovery began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Minimal movements, painful physiotherapy sessions, frustrated attempts to make sounds. In each failure, she was there, not to pressure me, but to support me. Sometimes her silence beside me was enough to keep me from giving up. When I finally managed to articulate a few words, my voice came out weak, broken. I asked for forgiveness. My mother smiled as if that conversation had already happened a long time ago. She said she had forgiven me the day she walked out the gate. that whoever loves forgives even before being asked. Months later, I was discharged. I left the hospital in a wheelchair, my body still frail and my pride completely broken. Outside, the world seemed the same, but I wasn't. Every step I couldn't take was a vivid reminder of who I had been and how much I still needed to learn. My mother was there, carefully pushing the chair as if she were taking me home for the first time. She came back with me. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't demand anything. She just came in and asked where she could put a mattress on the floor of my room. She said she wanted to stay close by in case I needed it during the night. That simple sentence hurt me more than any harsh word she could have said in the past. The routine changed completely. Now I was the one who depended on her to get up, to shower, to get dressed. My mother did everything with almost supernatural patience. She never mentioned the day I kicked her out. She never reminded me of the suitcase on the sidewalk. Her silence wasn't forgetfulness, it was raw love. With time came the crutches, then a few unsteady steps. Each small achievement was celebrated by her as if it were a gigantic victory. I saw pride in her eyes where before I only saw weariness, and that made me realize how blind I had been. Today, 2 years later, I still walk with difficulty. My mother sleeps in a bed next to mine. Every night, before turning off the light, she repeats the same phrase, that no abandonment can erase a creation made with love. I kicked my mother out when I was 70 years old. She returned when I was the weakest in the story, and that's how I learned, too late, the true meaning of respect.